Walk into a Tanzania market with the boys the other day.
You take one step,
and 6 merchants hit you like a swarm of mosquitoes hits a baby moose.
I offered $10,000 for a cute giraffe.
But somehow you give $30,000.
And I walk out with 3 elephant toys and a picture of a giraffe.
I paid triple the price, but at least I got 2.
Tried to hit my passport for a puppers, but the pilot used the woofer snuffer, so all they had was Serengeti Light.
And someone out here spent all our shillings.
That'd be me.
Next thing you know, we picked up jobs as boarders.
And Ryan said it's an easy up, down, forecheck, back check, paycheck. Ferda! Eric said it was an easy wheel snipe celly, boys.
An easy half clapper top shedder.
Like bringing a yacht home to the lake, boys.
Ferda!
Okay, yeah, so this is the story about how my brothers and I and some of our silly friends climbed Mount Kilimanjaro last year. A long time ago, when my brothers and I were wee young lads, we were like, hey, let's climb a tall mountain. So we did, and then our mom yelled at us because we were 10 years old and we should not be climbing on scree fields during family vacations, but it's fine, we almost died, but it was cool. So then we were like, yo, let's climb a real mountain. Why not the 7 summits? Honestly, yeah, it's a cliche goal, but the point of climbing a mountain is never just to reach the top. The allure of adventure is not found in achievement, but in the friends and memories we find along the way. So what I'm trying to say is, the goal of climbing the 7 summits may seem to be just a cliche pipe dream, but if it leads us through a life of memorable mountaineering, then it doesn't matter if we summit Mount Vincent with a pet penguin on a leash or conquer the heights of the Himalayas, because we still had fun anyway. But back to Kilimanjaro. Our team was made up of pure all-stars. We had Chaz, a professional lumberjack with a completely non-sexual predilection to rug burns on his behind. Jason, he is a pet mop and he thinks whiskey drinking is a hobby. Then we have Enrique, and Vicky, Eratiki, and Kipi, and Hiki, a Brazilian-born homeschooled Alaskan man with a fervent passion for physics. Eric, he's more or less a professional bus driver with a need for speed and an adoration for small trees. John, a big boy from the suburbs who likes electrons and Blink-182. And me, a guy who thinks long hair and a beard is a personality. We went with 4 guides, Malek, Justin, Aloise, and Godfrey, as well as more porters than I could possibly name. Each one was a key to our success, and we all really enjoyed having them along. We got to have a more personal experience with the people of Tanzania, as well as having the opportunity to better enjoy the climb. We took the extended Lemosho route, simply because it would give us more time to acclimate, and we could see more of the mountain. By the way, thanks Jason for doing all the planning and setup for this one. I promise I'll do some work on the next one, or plan the next one, or something like that. So, without further ado,
In this corner, standing at 5,985 meters tall, it's the tallest freestanding mountain in the world and the tallest mountain in Africa. And in this corner, standing 6 strong with a bunch of people to help them carry their stuff, it's a bunch of dudes who hate Star Wars.
Let's get ready to rumble!
Y'all ready for this?
we flew in on day 1 to Kilimanjaro Airport near Arusha and entered Tanzania. For most of us, it was our first time in Africa. We met up with our guides and sent it to our hotel. We took a nice walk through the city and got to check out some of the markets. What a place to be. Colorful spices piled up high and mountains of anchovies. We got our feet wet in the art of haggling and managed to be quite bad at it. Some of our greatest achievements were 2 paintings for the price of 3 and a picture of a giraffe for the price of a sculpture of a giraffe. Honestly, they come at you so fast and before you know it, you spent all your money. I'm not a big one for souvenirs, but I couldn't resist some of these cool things. Chessboards and paintings and carvings, it was all just so awesome. We continued our walk and had a nice dinner. The Kilimanjaro Premium Lager caught our eye, but we were keeping it light because the next day we had to set off for the mountain. So, no beer for us. Plus, their slogan is, if you can't climb it, drink it. So I guess that's a challenge. The next day, we were up early for the early start. We set out for the mountain at 6 a.m. and arrived at Lemosho base camp for registration and supply distribution. After a quick lunch, we were ready to go. Kilimanjaro is famous for having a huge amount of biodiversity and vegetation zones, and we got to pass through them all throughout the climb. Today, we started in the cultivation zone and moved up into the montane forest zone. We climbed at a steady pace to get to our first campsite, Nakuba Camp at 2,650 meters. The nature around us was a constant reminder that we are not back in Wisconsin. Monkeys were jumping around in the trees, and there were all kinds of beautiful bird calls. There was also a huge swarm of bees, at least a couple thousand of them, above us at one point on the trail, so much so that it was even a bit darker underneath them, and the sound of their buzzing was nightmare fuel. Getting to camp, the wonderful feeling of seeing all your things ready to go thanks to the porters was unexplainable. That and the hot meals and the near restaurant service on the mountain is something I had never experienced in my life before. We played a bit of light frisbee and acclimated to the elevation, as well as getting to know some of the porters. Overall, it was a good start to our adventure. Early wake-ups are so much easier when someone is waking you up with a hot mug of coffee. I will never be able to get over the service we had from our porters and cooks. It was ridiculously amazing. We set off out of the montane forest zone into the moorlands. This transition was like a flip of a switch. Suddenly, the trees just disappeared and everything opened up around us. We had our first views of Kilimanjaro as she rose up above the Serengeti, and it was stunning. Our guides mentioned that such a view is rare because it's typically enveloped in clouds by late morning, but we were lucky. We snapped some pictures, enjoyed the views, and trudged on to Shira 1, our campsite of the day. We all felt great. We were hydrated and well fed, and we were relaxing and gaining energy for the next part of our climb tomorrow. The mountain stayed exposed for the whole rest of the day and into the evening, a persistent but beautiful reminder of the challenge that lie ahead. One highlight of that day was having the porters constantly ask us to play with the frisbee, or the magic plate as they called it. They all thought the frisbee was amazing. As evening rolled in, we got to watch the moon rise up over the majestic glaciers atop Kilimanjaro, a place where we would soon be in a few short days. The next day we spent trudging on to Shira 2, with a detour through Cathedral Point on the Shira Peak for acclimation. Biodiversity around us was stunning. So many things I'd never seen before surrounded me as I gazed down to the beauty below. We could see Mount Meru in the distance as well. We enjoyed our rest up at the top of the peak until the clouds started to blow in. We quickly snapped some final pictures, watered the plants, and headed on towards Shira 2. As we arrived, we all felt pretty good. As always, we climb high and sleep low. With our guides constantly reminding us, sippy sippy pole pole, we were in prime condition to tackle the next step of our adventure. That evening, a surprise storm blew in and shook the tents a good amount. But it was nothing that a game of euchre and a Jar Jar Binks line that was quoted for the 542nd time couldn't solve. The next day was set to be quite the test for us. We climbed from Shira 2 through Lava Tower and back down to Barranco. Lava Tower is a high 4,600 meters, higher than anywhere in the lower 48 states of the US. I was the only one who had ever been this high before, but that didn't mean it was any less of a challenge for me. The day started out with a lovely sunrise over the moorlands. The vegetation around us slowly morphed into alpine desert as we climbed closer and closer to Lava Tower. Pole pole we went, slow and steady always wins the race at high elevation. Arriving at Lava Tower for lunch, we got to relax and enjoy the views. The clouds swam around the peak of Kilimanjaro and danced, taunting us and exciting our imaginations. The overall feeling was pretty good. I felt good, a small headache but nothing bad. Jason struggled a bit, but he powered through. At this point, it was a mental game. Eat, drink, and walk. Slow and steady, pole pole. We descended down from Lava Tower into the fog and got to enjoy some beautiful trees and plants. These things are amazing. They are slow growers and extremely long livers, and they exist only on this side of the mountain, nowhere else in the whole world. There were also these cute little purple-green balls that open and close depending on if the sun is shining on them or not. Arriving to camp, we all felt good. The fog began to clear, and we got to enjoy a wonderful view below. Being above the clouds, we got a stellar view of the stars, though the bright moon made it difficult for any astrophotography. Little did we know that beneath the cloud layer below was the city of Moshi, looking right back up at us. I can say that I was quite surprised to wake up and see the entire city down below that suddenly materialized overnight. The next day, we woke up with coffee in a frosty, frozen land. As the sun inched its way up, we got to see the spike balls transform. Our goal for the day was to conquer the Barranco Wall and reach Karanga. The summit was getting closer. Tantalizing it stood above the rocks and sand, calling us to visit. As we climbed, the fog and clouds blew around us, at times plunging us into a milky blindness. The peaks and city below swam in and out of view as we inched our way up. The world around us became more and more desolate until we finally reached the Karanga camp. We felt good and hydrated, full of inspiration from every Jar Jar quote that had echoed across the African landscape that day. After a short rest in camp, we set off a bit higher for an acclimation hike. Climb high, sleep low. Pole pole, sippy sippy. It's the key to any high altitude adventure. The next day was relatively easy. Our goal was a short hike up to Barafu Camp, our last stop before the summit push. By now, everything around us was desolation. Not much wanted to grow up this high. We slowly inched our way onwards as Uhuru Peak loomed above us, beckoning us closer with a cloud dance. As we reached camp, we relaxed, ate, and drank up to prepare us for the big day coming up. The views were great. We were lucky with the weather. It wasn't too cold, and beautiful clouds wrapped around us as we made our last preparations for the summit push. As the sun set, we were given a sunset to remember. The entire campsite glowed orange as the sun slipped beneath the cloud layer below. As we gathered our things, we knew that the next time we would see the sun, we would be looking down on it from the top of Kilimanjaro. We said goodnight at 7 p.m. as we were set to wake up at 11 p.m. The combination of altitude and excitement made it hard to sleep, but I got a good few hours in. As we crawled out of our tents, we were greeted by a crystal clear star-speckled sky. I'm a big astronomy guy, and it was amazing to see such a different sky. I had never been that far south before, and the Wisconsin sky I grew up with was nearly unrecognizable. We ate a light breakfast and set out on the trail. Marching through pitch-black darkness, bundled up from the sub-freezing temperatures, we inched our way up and up, closer and closer, bit by bit, towards the moonlit top of Africa. The stars above us slowly spun across the sky, and the moon, a lonely beacon in the night, guided our path, beckoning us closer and closer. I'm not gonna lie, this was not only a physically difficult challenge, but a mentally one too. My head was spinning, and I was frozen. I wanted to drink, but my water was frozen. I was tired, and I wanted to eat, but we couldn't stop, so we just had to push on. Here's where the strong team comes into play. If one person is struggling, the others can encourage him, take some of his things, or help him in any other way. Mountaineering is always a team sport, but in these moments, this fact rears its head so clearly. 6 blurry hours later, we were inching along the sharp glaciers that we had been staring at from below for the past week. We were frozen, to the bone, engulfed in a seemingly endless night. Just then, the sun lent its orangey yellow light, bending around the cloud and embracing us from the horizon with its warmth, energizing us to finish the climb. And then, suddenly, we were there. The continent of Africa sprawled out below us. The sun, finally beating its way above the horizon, cast a shadow of the mountain on which we stood, far out across the valley from where we came from. It was emotional, a moment of happiness, one of those moments of pure ecstatic joy that comes only after such a bone-tickling achievement. You cannot buy this feeling, you cannot cheat it. You can only put in the work, the effort, the sweat, and the blood. The allure of adventure, yes, was always in the climb itself, but the euphoria of achievement cannot ever be overstated. The emotions of achievement that I personally felt, surrounded by the brothers and friends I am lucky to have, overpowered all sense of fatigue and stress and instilled this moment deep into my memory, where it will stay for the rest of my life. So yeah, we geeked out at the top. Took too many photos, screamed and shouted, enjoyed the moon, the sun, the clouds, the shadows, and everything we could feast our eyes upon. With the adrenaline high still pumping, we took our last looks, gathered our things, and said goodbye to the tippity top of Africa. We had a long walk back to camp, and only after we started the descent did we understand how truly exhausted we were. We made it back to camp in a short 3 hours. I barely recognized the trail in the daylight. We had a short rest and celebration back in camp before gathering our things and heading back further down the mountain. Bouncing on the high of the day, we reached Mweka Camp, back in the moorlands at a humble altitude of 3,100 meters. We had a celebratory dinner and prepared for our final day of hiking. The next day, we gathered our things and had a bit of a celebratory thank you party for their porters and guides. We are so grateful for them and everything they did. The food was wonderful, they were also kind and friendly. We truly would not have had such a great experience without them. We snapped our last picture of Kilimanjaro from Kilimanjaro as we descended further back into the rainforest. After a good amount of hiking, we made it to the Mweka Gate, which concluded our hike. I was exhausted and dirty. Especially up on altitude, there was so much dust flying around that I was caked in dirt. We said our final goodbyes to our porters and settled in for a wonderful lunch at a cafe in the village nearby. Finally, we got to try the Kilimanjaro Premium Lager. I guess we can climb it and drink it. The next few days we spent in full tourist mode. Jason's friend Harold joined us from South Africa and we went on a safari. We saw some massive baobab trees. These things were huge. There were bones and skeletons everywhere too. It was nothing like I'd ever seen before. We saw all kinds of animals, up close and far away. Of course, trying to take pictures of them never works great, especially with just a cell phone. but I managed to get some cool shots through the binoculars. We saw some lions and hyenas too. And I freaking love ostriches. At lunch, the monkeys tried to steal our sandwiches. At one point, a huge group of baboons seemed to materialize out of nowhere and run across the road. And look at this tiny dik-dik. Overall, the safari was amazing and unforgettable. I wish I could have stayed there for more than just a day. There was so much to see. The next day we spent enjoying Kilimanjaro from afar. There was this beautiful blue lagoon that was such a warm place to swim. You could climb up into the trees and jump, or swing from the ropes.
Do you have any last words to say before we watch my friend and your brother die?
Good luck, pal.
Hey, good luck, pal. Good luck, pal. Our friend's gonna die.
Any last words, pal?
Send it!
Do it.
Send it!
Feeling sandy?
Woo!
Oh, I can't see this.
You and me both. Time to kill him.
The sun. That sun is a tough one.
I caught that. I caught that at the bottom.
That's a bad one.
Oh yeah!
Come on, John, save it. Yeah.
The camera! Oh, that was bad.
Come on, man. That was good.
You could even dive down into the caves and search for pretty stones. This was another highlight of the trip. We ended the day with a nice fancy dinner. You can tell it's expensive because the plates are so big compared to the food. The last day we spent on a coffee plantation tour. I had never seen how coffee was grown or processed, so it was super interesting to me. We then got to try a bunch of types of coffee and I ended up buying almost 5 kilograms of it to take home. We also visited a local brewery, toured another market, and then visited the home of our tour guide and got to meet his family. Our guide Malek is a stand-up guy. When he was young, he was a porter and he worked in the terrible conditions that those porters used to be subjected to. He decided to build his own tour company and to change the way porters are treated. Nowadays, he has opened a school for the porters as well as a hospital and clinic for them. He has personally changed the way the business of touring Kilimanjaro is done. If you want to climb, I recommend you go with him. Support the locals. You won't regret it. Okay, bye.